You've probably heard the story of Rosa Parks, the tired seamstress who, on a whim, refused to give up her seat on a bus, sparking a revolution. It's a simple, powerful image. But it's not the whole story. The truth is far more complex, more intentional, and ultimately, more inspiring. The woman who sat down on that Montgomery bus on December 1st, 1955, wasn't just tired from a day's work. She was tired of injustice, and her act of defiance was anything but spontaneous. This is the real story of Rosa Parks, a seasoned activist whose calculated act of resistance was the spark that ignited one of the most significant campaigns of the civil rights movement. To truly understand that fateful day, we need to go back. Long before 1955, Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks was an activist for decades before she became a household name. Born in 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama, she was exposed to the harsh realities of racial segregation from a very young age. She witnessed the Ku Klux Klan marching down her street and remembered her grandfather standing guard on their porch with a shotgun. These early experiences didn't just scare her, they forged a deep-seated commitment to fighting for equality. In 1932, she married Raymond Parks, a barber and a longtime member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. He was an activist himself, and he encouraged her to get involved. By the 1940s, Rosa Parks had joined the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, serving as its secretary and later as a youth leader. This wasn't a minor role. She was on the front lines, investigating cases of racial violence, registering black voters in the face of literacy tests and poll taxes, and working tirelessly to dismantle the system of Jim Crow. She was strategic. She was trained. In the summer of 1955, just a few months before her arrest, Parks attended a workshop at the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, a well-known training center for civil rights activists. There, she discussed strategies for nonviolent civil disobedience with other movement leaders. So, when she sat on that bus, she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just any passenger. She was the right person at the right time, with the right training and the right resolve to see it through. The stage was set. For years, the black community in Montgomery had been enduring daily humiliation on the city's segregated buses. They were forced to pay their fare at the front, then get off and re-enter through the back door. They had to give up their seats not just to white passengers, but for an entire row, if even one white person wanted to sit. The bus drivers, who were all white, often carried firearms and had the authority to enforce these segregation laws. In fact, several other black women had been arrested for similar acts of defiance before Rosa Parks. There was Claudette Colvin, a 15-year-old who refused to give up her seat 9 months earlier. And the fact she became pregnant soon after might make her a less sympathetic figure for a major court case. They were waiting for the perfect test case, and in Rosa Parks, a respected, dignified, and well-known member of the community, they found it. So, on December 1st, 1955, after a long day at work, Parks boarded the Cleveland Avenue bus. She sat in the front row of the colored section. As the bus filled up, the driver, James F. Blake, ordered Parks and 3 other black passengers to give up their seats for a white man who had boarded. The other 3 complied. Rosa Parks did not. When Blake threatened to have her arrested, she calmly replied, "You may do that." She was arrested, charged, and fingerprinted. Her action was the prearranged signal. That very night, E.D. Nixon sprang into action. He bailed her out of jail and immediately began calling other community leaders. Jo Ann Robinson, president of the Women's Political Council, had already been planning a bus boycott. With Parks's arrest, she and her colleagues worked through the night, mimeographing over 50,000 leaflets calling for a one-day boycott of the city buses on Monday, December 5th, the day of Parks's trial. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On Monday, The buses that were usually packed with black workers were almost completely empty. The one-day protest was a staggering success, showing the unity and determination of Montgomery's black community. That afternoon, a meeting was held at the Holt Street Baptist Church. Thousands of people packed the church and spilled into the surrounding streets, listening to the speeches over loudspeakers. It was here that a new, charismatic leader emerged. A 26-year-old preacher, new to Montgomery, was chosen to lead the newly formed Montgomery Improvement Association. His name was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In his first major speech of the movement, he electrified the crowd. He spoke of justice and nonviolence, declaring, "If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong." The crowd voted unanimously to continue the boycott until their demands were met. Courteous treatment by bus drivers, first come first seating, and the hiring of black bus drivers. What followed was a masterclass in community organization and resilience. The boycott lasted for an incredible 381 days. It was a monumental undertaking that required immense sacrifice. The black community, which made up over 75% of the bus system's ridership, had to find other ways to get to work, to school, to the store. A complex carpool system was created, a private taxi service coordinated from church dispatch centers. Black taxi drivers agreed to charge boycott supporters the same 10-cent fare as the bus. When the city cracked down on that, over 300 cars were enlisted to shuttle thousands of people every single day. People walked 4 miles, day in and day out, in the rain, in the cold, and in the summer heat. This wasn't just a protest. It was a complete restructuring of daily life. The economic impact on the city was devastating. The bus company was losing thousands of dollars a day and teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Downtown businesses, deprived of black customers, saw their profits plummet. The white city leadership responded, not with negotiation, but with intimidation. Boycotters were harassed by police. Dr. King's home was bombed. Rosa Parks lost her job and faced constant threats. Mass arrests were made, with leaders like King and Parks being charged with violating an old anti-boycott law. But the community did not break. The shared struggle forged an unbreakable bond. Churches became hubs of organizing and inspiration, holding nightly mass meetings to keep morale high. The boycott drew national and international attention, and donations poured in from across the country to support the carpool system and legal fees. While the boycott waged on, the legal battle was making its way through the courts. On June 5, 1956, a federal court ruled that bus segregation was unconstitutional. The city of Montgomery appealed, sending the case, Browder v. Gale, all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The boycotters held their breath, but they didn't stop walking. They were committed to seeing it through. Finally, on November 13, 1956, the Supreme Court affirmed the lower court's decision. Segregation on public buses was illegal. After one last legal delay, the official order arrived in Montgomery on December 20th. The next day, after 381 days of walking, the boycott was over. On the morning of December 21, 1956, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and other leaders boarded a newly integrated city bus. Parks fittingly took a seat right at the front. The struggle was far from over, but this was a monumental victory. The Montgomery Bus Boycott was a turning point. It demonstrated the power of mass, nonviolent protest to effect real change. It crippled the financial structure of a segregated city and forced the hand of the legal system, and it introduced the world to the leadership and philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who would go on to lead the civil rights movement for the next decade.